welcome to the show, Rick Westhead, who is obviously, as you know, a veteran investigative reporter with TSN. Most recently, you'll have read his incredible work on the Carl Beach saga in the NHL, the sexual assault scandal in junior hockey, and of course, in recent years, the Canada soccer soap opera, from the CBA to the CSB to DroneGate. Rick, welcome. Welcome
Hi.
to Footy Prime.
Good morning.
Good morning. You've got the best backdrop ever. So Rick right now is at his cottage, and it's absolutely beautiful behind him. I thought it was a virtual background, actually, but it's not. It's a legit, proper background.
Yeah, I mean, if it wouldn't shock me if some canoeists kind of paddle by, or there's fish kind of jumping out of the water behind us. So it's a lovely place, and over the last week, it's been a great place to watch the Olympics and to do the work that I've had to do. So it's been really, really nice.
It can be a tough job, right? We understand that everything you write is based in fact, it seems. It's never your opinion. It's hard, raw fact, and it's going to be polarizing with certain people at certain times. Do you ever just want to write like a fluffy sports story of no importance whatsoever?
Great question. I mean, I started my career doing that. I started as a traditional sports writer and thought that was going to fulfill me for my life. And after a few years of asking athletes how they feel and looking forward to the next games and asking them about goals and assists, I thought, for me, I wanted to do something different. So I reinvented myself, became a foreign correspondent for the Toronto Star, moved overseas for years, lived in India, covered Afghanistan on the ground, covered insurgencies in Pakistan and civil wars in countries like Haiti. Was in Japan during the tsunami, and I can remember an editor. I was a couple miles from the Fukushima nuclear reactor, and people were thinking that's going to melt down and blow up. And I can remember my editor with the Star saying to me, like, "Do you have your affairs in order?" And then newspapers, obviously, as an industry, these are hard times. And TSN came along 10 years ago and said, how about coming over and doing some journalism for us? So for 10 years, it's been amazing. And I know the investigative work is high profile for sure, but the stuff that I find the most fulfilling and fun are the features. We have a brand that we've created at TSN Originals, and spending time with athletes, not just pro athletes. We did a feature last year on Olivier Rio, a basketball player from Quebec, who at the time was 7'6", and he's now 7'9", the tallest teenager in the world. And just talking to him about what life is like when you're that big. But when it comes to soccer, we've done 2 features on Fonzie. I've done a feature on Milan and Johnny David and Kone and Osorio and Eustachio. These are all players who I had no idea who they were up until the last couple of years. And on the women's team side, Jordan Heidema and Quinn. So that's the stuff that I love doing the most. These stories, they're uncomfortable truths. They have to be told. And I think what kind of gets lost along the way is often this is players, like this is just me giving players a voice, right? When at the She Believes Cup, the women's team says they're going on strike, it's offering Christine Sinclair and Janine Becky an opportunity to explain what their grievances are about the federation. And the same over the last couple of years on, with players on the men's side and all the issues they've had there. I'm not taking a side. I'm reporting the problems that the men's team players have identified, and every chance giving the federation a chance to provide their response to that.
That's important, the response, because people say, oh, Rick's coming from one angle here. We're not hearing from Canada Soccer's angle. I'm assuming that on each of these stories, you go to them and say, this is what I'm doing. What is your response?
All the time. I mean, in the last 24 hours, I've gone to Canada Soccer, as I'm trying to work on my next reporting, multiple times explaining what I've been told, what evidence I have to corroborate what I've been told, the questions that I have for them. I'll say, and sometimes, if there's a lot of questions or if they're complicated, I'll say, listen, work with me. How much time do you think you need to get back to me with a fair response? And it might mean that we don't do a story for a couple of days, but that's fine. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important to try to be to give people an opportunity to respond before you report on major issues like this, and we do our best. And also, like, I'm held accountable by people I work for. My editors read all my copy and ask me questions about it, and then when it finally goes through all of that process, it goes to our legal team, who often have suggested changes and questions about it as well. So the work is vetted. We're very careful. And even still, I mean, that's not to say that we're perfect, right? I'm sure if you look back at reporting over the last years, you could say, well, what about this paragraph where you said that? And I bet there's a few instances where I'd say now, looking back, yeah, I wish I had more context for that, or I wish I'd elaborated on that a little bit more, but we do our best.
So you mentioned that the players, they trust you clearly. How would you describe your relationship with Canada Soccer at this point?
Getting better. And again, put yourself in their shoes. The people on the board, the people running Canada Soccer, kind of going back to when I was reporting on the CSB deal for the first time, this was new territory for them, right? Like, they tell me when any Canadian sport organization other than Hockey Canada recently has really come under scrutiny and has really been asked hard questions. Most of the time, the federations, all we see and know of them is, at the Olympics or a World Championship or a World Cup, people in blazers clapping and awarding medals, right? We aren't asking questions about people who run federations very often. So this was relatively new territory. But again, even all that reporting came out of national team players saying that the way that this contract with CSB was set up in their mind wasn't fair to them, because all of the money that was going from the sponsorships marketing the national teams was all going to a men's domestic professional league. So whether they're right or whether they're wrong, not for me to say. It's my job to give them a chance to make that allegation and to report on it.
And what would you say, Rick, to the people and people on Twitter or echo chambers, whatever ones that you're in, that because TSN is sometimes the rights holder of different tournaments or games to broadcast them, that you have a vested interest to bring down certain entities, and that is an inherent bias in your own reporting?
That's a smart question. I guess I would just say, look at our track record. Anyone who follows Canadian sports knows how important the World Juniors Hockey Championship is to TSN. Well, our reporting in 2022 led to that tournament being canceled and led to the brand of Hockey Canada being tarnished. I'm not sure it has come back yet. I don't know what you guys think about that, but that was reporting on our largest partner, our most important partner. Earlier this year, we broke a story about how the quarterback with the Toronto Argonauts, Chad Kelly, who was the most outstanding player in the CFL last year, was accused of sexual harassment. Again, our partner. Chad Kelly actually has worked on TSN as an analyst. So I think if you look at the body of work, there's enough there that proves to people that we'll go wherever the story takes us.
You ever been told by your bosses, no, that story, stay away from that story, avoid it?
Yeah. When I worked for the Toronto Star.
Oh.
Yeah, back for the Star, I was working on a story, and it didn't align with some of the issues with advertisers in the moment. And it wasn't a hard no, it was more a, well, isn't there, what about this as a story instead? So that person who told me that doesn't work in journalism anymore. But at TSN in the last 10 years, no one has ever said to me, don't do that story. It's not in our interests. It's always been, make sure you're right, make sure you're fair, do your job.
What about,
it does, so go ahead,
sorry, Sharms, I was just going to say, again, to the criticism sometimes that you're not well-versed enough in the sport to understand the nuances that are there that should be able to inform your story, therefore it affects what you're reporting. Like, do you think that that's an important factor to consider? Do you think that matters?
Give me an example. In what way would I need to know more about soccer to do this?
Well, I guess when you're reporting on the national team and on the federation, and then historically what has happened for this federation to shoot itself in the foot continually, but then also with the CSB deal, and everything that it pertains to broadcast rights and commercial rights and things like that, that you don't understand the game itself, so that you can't report on the story properly.
I mean, that's an opinion, and thank God we live in a country where people can have opinions. I would hate to think that we'd be wanting, to live in a place that's more like Venezuela or China, where media only report on what is approved by people, high up in power. Do I know enough about soccer? I mean, I know enough now not to call it offsides, plural. I think the word that gets used more than any other in this game is quality. I've heard people, oh, quality, like all the time now. So I'm starting to pick up some of the starting to pick up some of the parlance, but the truth is, you're right. Like, I'm not steeped in this game. I'm apologizing all the time to people for not understanding, all of the intricacies of soccer or football or whatever you're calling it. I'm doing my best. I make our work is being my work before it's published. Again, we talked about the editing process. Owen Mahar leads our soccer coverage at TSN. He reads my copy before it gets published. So while it's true that I don't know everything that there is to know about this game, the people I work with who, help to help to build our broadcast strategy, help to work on the production of the Copa and the World Cups. These people see this copy before it gets published, so that's a really, really important step for me as well.
Rick, what is the most surprising thing about this most recent story about DroneGate and Spygate that really caught your attention?
Man, I mean, that it happened in the first place at the Olympics. Imagine thinking it would be okay to get on a flight to France with a drone after, like, you don't have to read every story to know how serious the security situation is in France right now. And to fly a drone in restricted airspace at least twice, remarkable, to me. And then, it's just so sad too. Joey Lombardi, all I've heard from him about him from people is what a solid person he is, what a good person he is. And it makes me wonder, like, this guy spent 3 days in jail in France before he was convicted, given an 8-month suspended sentence, and sent home to Canada. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to travel internationally again. But I wonder, like, did anyone visit him when he was in jail for 3 days? Like, this was something, we've come to understand now has happened historically. The people who have been in charge of this, have they reached out to him? Are they going to be accountable? There's just so many questions.
What about the players, Rick? Like, I think that's something that we keep coming back to. I think we're standing in solidarity with them, and based on, Jimmy, Forrest, myself, our experience as players, I think there's, and I spoke to you about it, that's a betrayal from a player perspective, what the staff did to them. But for me, within that environment, there would be no reason to ask questions about how that information is sourced in terms of your preparation for a match. But is there any indication in your reporting so far that the players had any knowledge of that practice?
Well, I mean, we reported that players on the men's national team saw a video of Honduras's closed training. That's as far as we've gone with the reporting so far. I don't know, like, the question to me, and I'd love to know what you guys think about this. The players have said to a person, we didn't know, this is not on us. And I think that's really important, that none of them have known at the Olympics in this case. But when it comes to how do we handle this, if it's established that it's happened historically, is it enough to say that the players didn't know? Or, to your point, Amy, if the strategy for a game was informed by coaches who had this information that they shouldn't have had, how could that affect what FIFA ultimately decides to do, looking back to 2021 Olympics, looking back to other tournaments?
It's a team sport, right? And that includes the coaching staff. And that's the problem here, I think. And that is why, sure, the players might be collateral damage in all of this, but they are part of that program, rightly or wrongly, right? And that's where I'm very uneasy with it all, and how far back this goes. Is there going to be this passiveness from the players? So we no idea where they got that information from. It's really useful, but we won't ask questions. Is that going to come up at some point? I mean, this thing's not going to go away, I don't think, is it, Rick? It might internationally. I heard another podcast this morning, a very, very popular UK-based podcast, and they addressed it off the top of the show. And they got a lot of factual errors in there that they didn't know that much about it. I think internationally it's going to go away, but do you think this thing's just began domestically?
Well, I mean, think about what Canada Soccer is going to be obligated to do with pressure because of its sponsors who want to be I mean, you have to feel for the sponsors, right? Imagine being a company and sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into this brand over the last couple of years. You must just be, if you're a marketing manager, you must be shaking your head thinking like, are you kidding me? Like the World Cup in 2026 can't come soon enough for them.
I think, just to interrupt, CIBC, Rick, was still running a commercial that had Canada Soccer with Bev Priestman in it as of, I think 3 days ago, because I saw it and I was like, ooh, that didn't get pulled. So the tentacles that keep touching not just media, but to your point, what's going to happen at Canada Soccer, they're going to go deep and dirty, really.
Well, I think they have to. This is a search for the truth. You'd rather have somebody in the next couple of months find everything as opposed to having this dribble out over the next couple of years, wouldn't you? Like, do your fact-finding mission, talk to as many people as you can. And we know Canada Soccer has now hired an employment lawyer in Toronto whose job it is to do this independent external review. Canada Soccer has already promised that review result is going to be made public and that they will not edit it before it's actually published. So we should get an unvarnished look at what this investigator is able to find. How far back they go, I mean, I can tell you in 5 days, I've heard from close to a dozen sources on this story. People who have left the program, contractors, employees. I'd love to read you, because I think one of the things that I find interesting about this is the argument, well, everybody does this. It's no big deal. And so for anybody, first of all, on that might be true. Like in the doping world, a lot of people dope, but in 2014, 10 years ago, when Russia had this state-sanctioned doping program where they were literally handing bottles of dirty urine and blood through a hole in the wall and swapping them out for clean so they didn't get caught. Well, they got caught, and more than a dozen Russians won medalists in those Olympics. And what happened when they got caught? They were expelled from international sports for at least 4 years for that. Some federations longer. So there's consequences when you do it. And at the time, some people argued within Russia, well, everyone does this. Kind of the same argument we're hearing now. And I'm not putting what's happened now with these drones on the same level as doping. All I'm saying is when you get caught, there's a consequence, even if you're making an argument, well, everyone does it, like Bev Priestman did in her email to the HR person. But for anybody who's a parent, this to me, this is one of the details that kind of gets lost in this. If you're a parent, let's imagine that I'm going to read you a quote from one of the Canada Soccer contractors who did spying in 2017. They said that they worked as an analyst in Vancouver and were a university student in 2017. They were given a camcorder and they were told by a coach to find their way into a closed US team practice and to record it. And they wound up doing this twice. And listen to what this contractor says to me. The coach told me we can't go because if they catch us, we'll be in trouble. But you can go. And if they catch you, you can just say you're a student, like just a random person. So they gave me a camcorder, the kind of mom would take to record her kid's game, and sent me off telling me to get some footage of their formations. I found a vantage point and filmed two US practices, but the footage we acquired was so awful because I was shaking the whole time, and you can hear me hyperventilating. I was so deeply uncomfortable while I was on these missions, and I was being told that if I really wanted to work in women's football, if I really wanted to have a career, that this was the kind of tough stuff that you have to do. I was so desperately trying to break into this mysterious and competitive industry, and I didn't think about what was right or wrong. I just wanted to impress these powerful people. So any of you guys who are parents, your 21-year-old comes home and says, I know how excited we all were that I finally got a job. I can wear the crest. I work for a national federation. this is what the team has me doing, what would your response be?
Wow.
Yeah. No, you know what? I mean, this
Wow.
speaks to another layer, doesn't it? Toxicity of that power dynamic between the coaching staff and the minions working beneath them. And
Makes
how
you so
far back this
fucking
goes.
angry
It
to
makes you
hear
so
that.
angry. It's disgusting.
So
Yeah.
furious.
It's terrible. Rick, this investigation, has it been difficult for you, or have you been surprised how many people are willing to come forward with information?
Yeah, it's been surprising. I mean, I thought I was going to be watching the Olympics at the lake and swimming all week. So, every time I get out of the water or, out of a boat, there's another message from somebody saying, hey, so-and-so told me to talk to you, or I'd like to share with you what my experience at Canada Soccer has been like. And, again, not amazing. I would much prefer that the focus just be on the athletes at the Olympics, because they've worked a lifetime to get to this point for sure. But this is the media's job. I'll have more reporting. I know others will. The Globe and Mail has reporters in Paris and in France, and that is one of the best investigative reporting networks in the country. Networks meaning just networks of journalists. It's also been a little bit hard personally, if I'm honest. I mentioned this to Amy. It gave when there was so much anger and venom on social media and Twitter in particular on the weekend after we first started reporting this. Never mind that the sanctions to Canada were not because of anything we reported, right? Like Canada Soccer managed to get hold of, had Bev Priestman's emails, gave them to FIFA, and that is what FIFA used to decide to decide on the 6-point penalty to Canada. But on social media, that doesn't matter. You're dealing with nameless, faceless keyboard warriors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up on the weekend having, a lot of thoughts back to reporting on Kyle Beach's story and on the Hockey Canada story, where people were wishing my kids ill will, saying horrible things about me. And on one hand, I try to tell myself, well, hey, I've done conflict zone reporting. This is nothing. Just turn off the internet for a little while. Walk away from it. That's hard. We're all human. We don't like, especially when your kids get it are brought up. It's not pleasant. But I found a solution. On Sunday, I was talking to a close friend about this, and I told him, how I was feeling, and it was getting to me a little bit on Sunday. And he said to me, "Oh, buddy, I got you. Give me your Twitter login." I was like, what are you going to do exactly? Because I will pay a price. I will pay a price for this. So for the last week, he has, like, bless him, he has, like, and I don't know why he likes doing this, but he's gone through and blocked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and just like searched for as much of that anger as he can, and blocked. And I think a few times he's actually responded to people too. And I said, please don't do that. Like, let's just leave it.
I wouldn't say that. Stop doing that.
Let's just leave it with the blocking. But I mean, the point is, my job at TSN does not require me to use social media, right? I don't get paid more, and I don't value my own worth or my work more if I have 20,000 or 50,000 followers or 500 followers or whatever. So, to me, it's an easy call. There's no obligation to be on there in the first place. There's definitely no obligation to have to take stuff like that. So just block it and move on.
Rick, we live in that social media bubble though. And even our crew, being completely transparent, we've supported ourselves through Footy Prime therapy, which is being able to talk about things. And one time, and Amy, I'm just going to talk about this. You were going back and forth with someone. You put it, and I said, sometimes you need a friend to say, get the fuck off social media. And I did, and she did for a day. And that's all you need, because it's the perspective, right? And so one of those things is, how do you said it's hard for you. How do you get over that, as far as what do you do in your free time to go, okay, I'm going to let this go? Is it a swim? Is it is it talking to your pals? Is it 64 beers? I'm not saying it's good.
We drink heavily.
Yes, drinking heavily. We were doing that last Saturday. But it's one of those things that we do to support ourselves. And we realize every time Amy's in town, it's an opportunity for all of us to support each other again.
Yeah, that's that. I thank you for that question. We have to, like, the people who have created social media are really good at what they do, and they make more money when we're on it more, right? It is as addictive as any street drug you can find for a lot of people. And but last weekend I was telling you about, speaking to my friend, I was at a cottage of a friend, and there was 8 adults there, 8 of us. Of the 8, guess how many are on Twitter? 1, just me. So another reminder, like, Twitter is not real life. My friends would just say to me, "Hey, let's go for a swim, let's go for a jet ski, whatever."
Do you ever, just before you press that send or that submission button on a story, is there ever a moment where you go, man, this is going to cause a reaction? I better prepare for this. Do you ever second guess yourself?
Yeah. I mean, if I could have a story back, I did a story about, like, leading into Copa, and I talked to a source at Canada Soccer about, how financially distressed that organization still is, even after all the success of recent months and years. Because again, more sponsors come to the table with money, it all goes back to CSB. The only way that Canada Soccer can make more money, really, is by having more games in Canada and generating ticket revenue, and by what's the other? Oh, help me out. Match fees.
Sponsorship.
So no, sponsorships all go to CSB.
Yeah.
Excuse me, philanthropy, right? Kevin Blue,
Yeah.
the new general secretary, this is something that is a specialty of his, from dating back to his days on the West Coast in U.S. college. And so, you could have more Canadians willing to write checks to Canada Soccer, or you can have more games in Canada. Those are really the 2 ways that you can robustly increase your revenue as a federation. So the point of this story going to Copa was, hey, even if Canada does well in this tournament, it could still be a problem for them financially. And the reason was, even though some expenses are paid by, by the organizers for Canada playing in that tournament, not all of them are. For instance, a camp is not covered. So you're bringing players in from around the world, and you're spending a week together, or more, before the tournament starts. That's costing you real money, like 6 figures, like 500,000 to $1 million. Then you get into the tournament, and even if you got to get out of the group, and the person I talked to didn't anticipate the men's team going to the semifinal, good for them. We did break even, at least, on that tournament. There are still going to be financial problems. There was a story, or there was a post or something, about how Canada was going to make $8 million from the semifinal, from playing in the semifinal. That was wrong. They made, the payment was $4 million, and of that $4 million, half of it, $2 million, went to the players. So Canada Soccer was actually left with a $2 million payment, which would have covered all of their costs related to the tournament. So, if I could do it over again, I'm not perfect. If I could do it over again, I would have offered more context for that.
Do you find at this point, Rick, sources seek you out specifically, or are you still digging around trying to find stories as well? How does it work in your profession?
I guess when you start out covering a sport, you are doing the digging and trying to find people who either work in a federation or team or league, or have worked there. But it's at a point now, I mean, there's been enough reporting that people are really coming to me, almost on a daily basis, to be honest. So it's, I guess that's a blessing and a curse, right? You want to be somebody who can tell important stories. That's the job that I'm in, to do this kind of journalism. But it'd be awfully nice, like I said, like, I would love to do a story a year from now on how this has been cleaned up, how the federation's back on a financial, strong footing, and everybody's just talking about the World Cup in 2026.
Who's worried right now, Rick?
Who's worried?
Yeah.
Who do you think's worried right now, based on the stuff that you've read and watched?
Well, with the tentacles going as far as it looks as if, obviously, John Herdman comes into play, and guys like Jason DeVos, who are acting secretary at the CSA, I think very worried.
I think that's fair. Bev Priestman, of course, was an assistant to John Herdman when he was the coach of the women's team. And, you know, if you listen to how people's statements are provided, you know, these are very carefully worded statements, and I'm probably not telling you something you guys haven't already picked up on or talked about, but you know, John Herdman, who's now coaching at TFC, when he's asked about this, has been very deliberate to say that this sort of spying has not happened at the Olympics or World Cup.
But
Take exactly.
We read that. We actually, yeah. We
it was
talked
pretty
about
clear.
that.
Yeah. I know. It's all pretty messy. But I mean, listen, I say the Carl Beach story, the junior hockey scandal. That's not even a sports story, right? It goes beyond sports. Coming from a background of working in war zones, for example, near a nuclear reactor melting down, does that put things in perspective though from a sporting standpoint? Are we really self-important here regarding sports and just how important it really is?
It should. But the people who come to me, like, I read you guys that quote from the former contractor, the amount of trust that they're placing in me, right, to tell me their stories and to share, like the fear that a number of these sources have today, right now, about blowback, about being sued, about what they're allowed to say. It's significant. And so this isn't just a sports story. This is about the lives of people who have worked really hard to get somewhere and they feel like they've been betrayed. And there's another side to the story, which maybe we haven't heard yet, but they deserve to have a platform to share their experiences and stories, right? And offer their truths about what's happened. And again, that's the job.
Do you feel that most of these contractors, Rick, have lawyered up at this stage, or are they very careful with their wording with you?
No, they may have lawyered up, but none of them are especially careful. There's a lot of emotion in what they're saying. They're, especially because I'm having to go, I'll do an interview with somebody and then I'll go and double check facts they've told me and dates and times and coaching staff members and things like that. And then I'll have to go back to them 2 or 3 times usually to try to challenge them on what they've remembered. Not challenge them in a, aggressive confrontational way, but challenge them more just in, I need to make sure that your memory is as clear as you say it is, right? Like we don't hear a call from somebody or get a text message or a direct message from someone and say, oh, okay, well, there's my story and pop it up on TSN. So, there's a lot of emotion, I think, with where these people are coming from, and a lot of fear still. In terms of lawyers, I'm not sure if anybody's hired one yet.
Do you try and encourage them to come out with their name, or do you respect straight away the anonymity of their comments?
Yeah, what a good question, James. I think that it adds so much more credibility when you have someone's name next to a quote. So always, I'm reminding someone of that, but I wouldn't say that I ever pressure anyone to do that. It takes enough courage to kind of find me in the first place. A story like the stories that we had on the weekend about this, they were from people who we granted anonymity to. It's important to note, though, it's not like I'm the only one with that information. My editing team knows who I've talked to, and our lawyers know who I've talked to. This is not just me driving the bus on my own and saying, okay, well, here's a good quote, right?
What were their names, Rick?
John Doe and Jane Doe.
Those Doe siblings.
D-O-E?
Yeah, but listen, I think we'd all agree that when you see somebody with a quote and their name is next to it, it does mean more. And that is what I will say to people kind of off the top. And most of the time in this story, all the time in this story, at least, they just are not comfortable putting their name out there yet. And we'll see what happens. Like one of the things I'm curious about with this investigator that Canada Soccer has hired, there's so many questions I have about how this is going to work. How are they going to find people? How are they going to find current and former employees and contractors? Are they going to promise them confidentiality? What if they want to get access to somebody's phone? How do you possibly go about that if you don't have leverage over them other than to say, hey, I can write your name in my report that you refuse to give me this information? There's so many questions I think that still need to be answered.
Rick, what do you say? I was listening to your the podcast you did with Herc Gomez, and you're talking about, you know, the fact that the U.S. soccer was aware that the men's national team used a drone, but didn't report it because of the political kind of implications, and it would affect hosting or co-hosting the 2026 World Cup. So, do you think that that's why it's such, like, allegedly a deeply embedded practice in the game? And then do you think that FIFA coming down hard on Canada and why it matters to Canadians, do you think that that will affect the integrity of the game? Will it act as a deterrent to this happening?
Yeah, in fact, that was not my reporting. That was an ESPN story about how the U.S. allegedly had knowledge of this drone use. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear the same thing that you did, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why wouldn't the U.S. make a bigger deal of it at the time? Like, this sport is about politics. Is that going to shock anyone who's, I don't have to be an expert in soccer to know that, right? That this is a political game. Look at FIFA. And so there's probably a lot there at play where people are trying to figure out, like, okay, well, if we do this, what will the consequence be there when we want to bid to host these games or send a team here or get a friendly with this team? I'm sure there's a lot of that. I mean, I'm not an expert on this part of it, but I'm sure that is, you guys would know better than I would. What do you think? Is that part of this?
I mean, I've heard both. I've heard, and I feel like the era that I played in, the technology was not what it is now, right? I'm dating myself considerably there, but I've heard everything from, you know, Tyler Adams saying everybody does it, and again, to I think one of your opening remarks was like, that does not make it okay. It's still cheating. To somebody like Jimmy saying, who's a coach in the modern game, saying no, that's not fucking true. Like, everybody doesn't do it. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I think it's something that's always happened. Just now, I think the technology that's utilized makes it a little bit more overt, especially the fact that you're doing it in illegal airspace, right? Yeah, you're going to come down hard on them for that, just the height of stupidity in order to do that. But I don't know about how it applies to the practice of drone use to spy, and then also as it pertains to the integrity of the game moving forward. I really don't know.
And again, think about, like I said, when I talked about how there's more questions to have answered, there are so many. Think about, like, what are Transport Canada's rules on flying drones? Has anyone thought about that for a second? You know, are they different province to province? Because I just did a quick look and I found a Toronto law firm that breaks out what the penalties are for breaking laws about drone flying. And one of the laws is you can't fly a drone more than 400 meters without a pilot certificate and without registering your drone. So, I mean, and that's in Ontario. What is it like across provinces? What is it like in US states? I'm just speculating here. I'd be willing to bet there's more regulation on drones in the US than there is in Canada. So how many people have been put in a position historically where they risk, like, being charged, like Joey Lombardi was?
I think trying to get intel on your opponents goes back forever in football, right? And whether it's hiding in a bush, in a stadium, or flying a drone, right? As technology evolves, there's more, ways to find out this information from your opponents. But I think it's irrelevant whether we all do it or they do it. It's illegal. It's frowned upon. FIFA have language in their rules about morality, and which is ironic, but they do regarding this type of thing. So it is wrong. I think when Bev comes out and says, publicly, listen, everyone's doing it, all the top 10 teams are doing it, that's going to piss off the other teams in the top 10 right now, and put a big target on Canada's back. Do you think we're an easy target as well in many regards? Because we are, let's be honest, we're not that noisy worldwide, internationally.
Yeah. I don't know enough about how other countries view Canada yet. I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert on this part of it. But the whole everybody does it. If you've got a kid and your kid is 7 or 8 years old and comes home from school having just got in trouble and says, well, everybody was doing it, what's your answer to them?
Yeah.
Do it more.
Doesn't matter.
Be the best. Be the best.
Be a sheep. That's right. Don't stand out. Go with the flow.
Yeah, I mean, let's not. Canada is not alone here. It's not the only sport organization that has, tried to do something like this. The New England Patriots, they had a spying issue as well. The Houston Astros in the World Series got caught, right? So it happens, And when it happens and people get caught, you pay a price.
What is the biggest fear, Rick, with the people coming forward and the contractors? I guess they're worried about getting jobs in the future as well. That has to be a concern for them, doesn't it?
I would think so. I mean, imagine we talked for a second about some of the online reaction just to the reporting, right? Imagine if somebody put their name next to some of those quotes, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine that you come forward and think, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to put my name out there because I know it adds more credibility. I don't know. What do you guys think the reaction would be?
I'd be worried about getting another job.
Whistleblowers
personal
don't
reputation,
flourish. Yeah,
right?
whistleblowers don't flourish. Let's be honest. You can
There
go
aren't many
through-
jobs either, right?
No.
In the game, it's small business, really, especially in Canada. Right?
Yeah.
As Jimmy will tell you, right? There aren't that many jobs
No,
out
it
there.
is.
It's tough.
Exactly.
And if
Rick, are
you've
you
got,
surprised how
black
many
magic-
people are involved in this?
Yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't heard about this before now.
Yeah.
I mean, CONCACAF confirmed to me that there was a complaint in 2022 where when the women's team was playing in Mexico against, I think it was Panama, and and then you had the year before that, you had the men's team, in the incident with Honduras where they were accused of using a drone, but it was never proven. So you have both of these cases happen, and you're like, we're still going to push forward and we're still going to do it. That's to me seems kind of reckless, doesn't it?
Arrogant at the very least, right? It's incredible. Almost out of time here, Rick, but new Canadian soccer leadership comes in and they talk about transparency. And so far we've seen that from Kevin Blue, from Peter Caruso. And if they're going to, divulge the findings of their investigation, again, that's important. Do you see a noticeable difference with the new leadership compared to perhaps previous editions?
Yeah, I do. I see people, I mean, but again, this is not their mess, right? So Kevin Blue and Peter have an opportunity here, right? They can actually come out of this as being known as the people who helped to restore the integrity of a federation. So for them, it's an opportunity. Doing the right thing like that, it's an obvious for them. They should still get credit for doing it, of course, but to me, it's like it's a no-brainer. I think back to reporting on this, originally my times reporting on the Federation, and I think the CSB deal was kind of the first story that I did on the Federation. It was really tough. I was able to managed to reach former board members who told me that they were just so disenchanted with how that Federation had been operating. I didn't have as much success with Nick Bontis or with with other board members who were still there at the time, but it's a new day. That board has largely turned over. There's a lot more scrutiny on Canada Soccer now, not just from media, but from our government, rightly or wrongly. And I'm as crazy as it sounds right now, I'm actually optimistic about where this will wind up a year from now. I think it'll be in better shape than it is now.
Yeah, perhaps a house cleaning and, like I said, new beginnings. When can we expect the next column come out? Rick, anything in the works? I'm sure there is.
Well, I'll have to talk to our editing team and our lawyer about that. I mean, in a perfect world, we'll have some more reporting very soon. But I've got to also look after myself and get out on the boat and do some fishing this weekend. and
well, you've got chirping birds in the background right now.
Yeah, I know, it's lovely.
I'm like sitting there going, this guy's living an okay life after dropping all these bombs.
I almost turned my camera around. There was a chipmunk kind of sitting off like a foot from me here, looking at me, waiting for us. I'm like, no, go away.
Hey,
that would have been very Footy Prime, though, Rick. You would have fit in.
That chipmunk could be a spy. Just be careful.
Oh boy.
You don't know where they hide those cameras.
Can I get one last one in, Sharms?
Yeah.
Sure.
Save my hardest one for last. So, Rick, when I introduced you to Craig Forrest to March, I think 2023, it was Canada were about to play Honduras, I think a Nations League match at BMO. Were you most impressed by A, his skinny jeans, B, the bendy straw in his Diet Coke, or C, his immense torso?
I'll just say I wear a lot more skinny jeans in the days since I met Craig.
Who's more impressive, the 7'6" teenager or Craig Forrest at 6'5", but a big 6'5"?
Yeah, I mean, they're both big guys. I'm 5'11", and they both towered over me. It's funny though, that story on Olivier. Think about it was just so like part of my job that's so fun is being able to go in and meet people kind of in their homes and on their turf. And for that story, we actually took Olivier to the home of Bill Wennington, who's a Canadian former NBA player, and Bill's like 7'4". So we go into his home, and half of his home, in Bill's home, half of the door, the openings are built so that he doesn't have to duck down, but half of them are not. And so I was like, well, why would you do this? And he said, well, because if every door opening in my house was built for me, I would get used to not bending down. And anytime I went to someone else's house, I'd knock myself out.
That's an athlete for you, right? A sportsman being coached. That's
good
great.
awareness.
Deprogram the brain every now and again, right? It's important.
Are you wearing skinny jeans right now? I can't tell, Rick. I'm just this.
He's wearing shorts. Are you kidding me? Come on, jeez. Any other questions, guys, before we say farewell?
No, we're gonna get you on again, though.
We got a lot there. That was great, Rick. Thank you so much. You've become like just must read for sports fans, obviously, but specifically soccer fans in Canada. So
listen, I honestly, I really appreciate what you guys do. I've been watching more kind of as I've been trying to learn about soccer. So when Amy, when you're challenging me on, well, how much do you really know about the game? A lot of what I've learned about it over the last year has been from, Stevie Caldwell and Kevin Kilbane and Owen, but also from you guys. Like I see all the clips on Twitter when I don't have time to listen to a full episode. So keep doing what you're doing. It's really, really good. Well, and you're getting better too. And you're getting better.
We started at a pretty low ebb, so we've come a long way.
I'm not saying that. Take the compliment, Charmin. Take the compliment.
Sorry.
Graded on a curve for sure.
Rick, thank you so much. This really enjoyed it. Then we'll get you back on, and good luck with everything. And enjoy
the fishing.
Yeah, enjoy the content.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks,
Bye.
Rick.